Every clock's a little different, right? Oh,
There it
there we are.
is. There's a fistful of
Oh,
lemon.
I just love technology. It's like, here we are, just putzing away. All right, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Accuracy in America. We are really live this time instead of the pre-recorded live. So if you actually comment this week, we'll actually respond probably for a change. Anyway, I am Don Irvine, joined once again by my co-host Brian McNichol.
Good morning, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
Yes, those dog-faced pony soldiers. Waiting for some more good stuff, but I think there's always plenty of news to keep us busy, no matter what people are saying or doing or whatever around here.
Well, now people are calling, Biden the names. And him naming us, we're naming him. We've changed his name to Brandon, so we don't have to say bad words.
Yeah, yeah. That whole thing has become quite the thing here.
Yep.
We might even get to that a little bit later. So let's start off here just by today. Just happens to be 10/20, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's 9 months. If you just since President Biden was inaugurated, and so it's as good as time as any way to kind of look back at this. Both of us have talked about just kind of constant failures of this administration, uh, remarkable failures in the sense of, just for the first 9 months, though a lot of those occurred even before we hit this 9 month mark, where they were there at the 6 month mark and 5 month mark and other, different places
The
of time.
day two mark,
Yeah, the G2 mark. So I mean, 9 months. I mean, he's got theoretically, 48 months total. So we've got, once again, theoretically 39 more months of the Biden administration, but it's
bad when you
scary,
put it
a
like that.
disaster. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's been a pretty much complete disaster. So on day one, he canceled the Keystone Pipeline, all drilling on federal lands. Basically gave away energy independence, which we had worked about 70 years to achieve and had achieved under President Trump, and we punted it on day one. And then, about 4 months later, we were back begging OPEC to increase production, to lower prices, because now we're back playing in these international oil markets again, which we were always buying, some of our oil overseas, but we didn't have to, right? And it was benchmarked against all the energy we were producing here. So, it was kept at a low price. So as a result, I mean, that's a day one decision Biden made, promised to his, leftist green constituency. And, the price of gas has gone up, more than $1 a gallon now. And, it's the price of oil is climbing again, and we could be looking at $5, $6, $7 a gallon gas by this time next year. So I mean, we're just getting into the bad part of the energy problem.
Yeah, now we've heard calls in the past. We've heard lots of predictions in the past, and we've gone through some of these cycles about gas is going to go to 5, 6, 7. Now, if you're in California, you live that every day almost
Yeah,
anyway.
you're already like, 7. That's not far from what it is now, right?
And then they make these arguments. It's like, well, look at the price of gas in Europe and Asia. That's always been kind of high. But to me, that's apples and oranges in a lot of ways. You can't really say that,
Right.
right?
Because that's my point, though, is like the reason that we're not at European price levels is because we produce it ourselves, and they don't. They don't want that in their country. And like, I think 70% of their electric power is nuclear, right? And so we're like, oh, nuclear, that could be an accident, and they're like, bring on nuclear, so we don't have to, mine for oil or coal or anything else, natural gas, anything else. So that's just one mistake of those first 9 months. There's also the Afghanistan withdrawal, which he didn't have to do, and which he can't blame on Trump, which was a complete debacle and shook everybody's faith in the world, that we still have our place atop the military industrial scene, and can force policy right in our direction. And it's like, now it's like we're we're impotent. We can't, make our will known. And, you can see China's menacing Taiwan. All the bad guys are back in business. Iranians, right, are back making trouble again because, the check on them making trouble has been eliminated. The United States has, basically shown that it can't function militarily and that our command and control is a big problem. Our leadership is worried about, woke ideology more than being prepared to fight wars. You have to hand it to Mattis and those guys. They didn't always get along with Trump, and they did do some things that arguably undermined him while working for him. But they were concerned with the lethality and the effectiveness of the fighting force more than, politically correct goals. Okay. That's one of the things. Inflation is now at a 17-year high and headed to levels not seen since Jimmy Carter. And their response is to dump another $5 trillion of, fiat currency into the economy, which, will only cause more inflation. They don't really have an answer to that. More people have died of COVID since Biden became president than when Trump was president. His promise to get in and eliminate COVID as our problem has been completely inept. And it's like we have to go back and be thankful that when this started, Trump was in charge and did put the priorities in the right place. Started working on both therapeutics and vaccines. Now, when the politics entered into that, we got sidetracked onto vaccines and not therapeutics, which is, the exact wrong thing to do with a disease with a 99.99% recovery rate. So, we don't know what comes next from these people. It's just been one bumbling failure after another. And thankfully, they've not been able to get their priorities across the line on spending in Congress, because that's even worse. They want to add, $6 trillion more to the debt.
Right. And you can see here Bob's comment. Charles Krauthammer was certainly on the mark in characterizing Biden as a Herbert Hoover of U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Biden right now, in 9 months, he's headed into the history books as being like the worst president we've ever had.
Yeah.
It is
he's
just
well on his way. He's utterly inept, and everybody around him is just as inept. He doesn't have one person in there that you would say, okay, if we move to a more effective president, that person we should keep, right? There's no Mike Pompeo in there where you say, okay, he's really effective, whether you like his president or not. It's all bumbling idiots.
Yeah, you can't even look to the vice president. That's just
you can't, because you can't see her because she's not anywhere. And you have these port crisis going on, and the Secretary of Transportation has not been seen since August because he's home taking care of his kids, right? That he adopted, right? No one had those kids. And when they give you parental leave, part of what's going on is, there's a woman back there. Not what, as the Post called it today, a birth-producing individual. Seriously, that's what they call it. There's a woman back there who had a baby, which is a pretty tough thing to do. And the woman needs some physical recovery time. And society has come to say that, probably could use her guy standing there with her for a little bit, while she comes back, physically. There's no woman involved in this, right? It's two guys and two twins. It's and one of the guys doesn't have a job. So it's one of those things, you take a couple of weeks, right? But, they've abused this. This is a guy, he's got a cushy job. He's got a big name to it. He's making good money, and him and his boyfriend are the talk of the town, or husband, or whatever he is. And, showing up to work is the lowest of priorities for him. You can't argue that that's not the case. So, and I don't know how much he would help anyway, because, Ron Klain's running the country and so forth. But he's not even there. And the most remarkable thing about that whole story, though, is that it was 2.5 months before anyone noticed that he wasn't there. Right. No one's like, oh, wow, where's that transportation secretary? No one is watching this guy, right? They're just doing whatever they want on our nickel. And like, while things are going to hell in the handbasket. The other thing is Biden, which kind of goes to this is, immigration, right? We had the last year that Trump was fully in charge, we had about 20,000 people cross the border illegally. This year, about 2.5 million have crossed the border, right? Because they've just changed the policy. They quit enforcing the border. They quit enforcing laws that we're counting on. They dropped those agreements with the northern tier countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, to keep people there instead of letting them come to us. And now there's supposedly another caravan of people headed our way. These are people that are in the country. They're not vetted. They're not all, here's a news flash for you. They're not all from Central America or Mexico. Like, some of them are from other parts of the world where the people are even more hostile to us, right? And we don't know who they are. And the estimate is of those people who came into the country, 15 to 20% of them have COVID, right? So, it's probably okay. But I mean, some people are going to die as a result of coming into contact with people who would not have gotten in under Trump, but are getting in under Biden. The trust in government to handle our big problems in those 9 months has gone from 53% to 39%, both foreign and domestic policy. The domestic number was a little lower to start with, but yeah, we're down into 39, and we're down into personal polling of the president that is lower for a more sustained time than Trump's presidency. Now, if you go look back at the records of where Trump actually polled, like the people who do it all the time, like Rasmussen, who keep up with it on a daily basis, this was about the time, this and the next 2 or 3 months were the lowest point of Trump's presidency, the end of the first year in office, polling wise, right? After that, he never was that low again. But Biden's polling numbers are lower than Trump's now, right? They are staying sustained at a lower level. It's not just a day or two of everybody's mad at him, as was the case with Afghanistan, right? Right as that was going on, he just nosedived. But now, I mean, on a sustained day in and day out level on Rasmussen, Trump is about 40, 41, 42%. Even his darkest days, Trump spent about a week at that level throughout his whole presidency. And most of the rest of the presidency, he was at 43 or higher. And most of the time it was even higher than 43 and 45, 46, right? You say, oh, those are terrible polling numbers, but they're a lot better than what the current guy's getting.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot there to talk about of all the things that you just kind of listed there. Going back to gas prices and to Europe, you mentioned nuclear energy. I mean, one of the things there that happened too was Angela Merkel. She shut down. She was, after Fukushima in Japan, decided to shut down nuclear power plants in Germany, and so. And there was an effect upon that because Europe depended upon those kind of things, and they got really skittish. They weren't really sure, and they do that. And we know that history has shown that nuclear power overall is safe and it's cheap, and that was good for Europe. All of these countries, and U.S. included, they've made all these pledges, by 2035 or 2050, we want to go carbon neutral, all these emission issues and things like that. So they make this push to green energy. But as we have talked about on the show before, when the wind stops blowing in Europe, you got a problem. They don't have the ability to there's no real good backup plan for this.
And, right. So what's happening to the Germans, right? Their energy prices are skyrocketing. It's even worse than here. And they're on their knees to Russia again, right?
Right.
They're having to beg the Russians to bail them out, which the Russians are happy to do for a price and, and policy considerations, right? Because what the Russians have always gotten out of this is, we'll charge you this, but you will also do what we want on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and Russia's playing. They've got these guys right now because they've got all this natural gas and they've been supplying it to these countries for years. And when you don't have another alternative and you're stuck dealing with Putin on this, you've got a real problem.
Yeah.
Germany's in a world of hurt on this, and their population they're gonna really get crushed this winter.
Yeah. So also on that, so Trump had set up where we could export natural gas to Europe ourselves, do it over ships. We had built natural gas terminals. Louisiana, there's 2 or 3 on the East Coast. So we could put gas on boats and send it over, right? We'd given them an option. We'd also, kind of boxed in Russia. Russia couldn't use gas as a lever for influence and hard currency the way it could, before Trump did this, right? Of course, Biden comes in, immediately punts that advantage right back to the Russians. I mean, they just don't understand. They're being humiliated by China now. The dictator of North Korea is back to firing missiles, right? Everything that Trump had tamped down in the world, these guys went and undid it just to spite him, and with disastrous results.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that I don't think a lot of people really understand here about this Biden policy, is that there was really no strategy per se behind it. It was just basic. It's like, okay, Trump did this, we're going to undo this. We're going to do the reverse. And
Right.
They didn't think about the consequences. They didn't think about the good. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people out there, and I think both of us know people out there that they look back at this and they're like, boy, did we make a mistake by pulling the lever in essence for Biden. The hatred, the animus, all for Trump, clouded their judgment, and so Trump was definitely far from the perfect president. There's a lot of things he did that he probably shouldn't have done. I mean, his personalities, there's certain things there, but as we've said before here, is that he did get to the heart of the matter on many things. He reformed things. There are things that he was changing that were, in essence, really wound up being for the good. More people are seeing that now because their judgment, with Trump's Twitter storms and everything like that, it was kind of hard to see some of those things. But now 9 months later with Biden in office, and you look at Biden's actions, you say, whoa, wait a minute. It's like, why have we undone all of these things? Look at where we are. You touched upon, this inflationary thing. It's, yeah, I mean, we're old enough that we have lived through those inflationary paths. I mean, we were young men, back then, in essence, when this first happened, and it, for the last several decades, people growing up today, the young people,
Yeah.
they didn't know what inflation, even my kids.
Right. You're like, that's a good point. Like, how old do you have to be to really have appreciated what this inflationary cycle means? And I think, you would have to have been aware of what's going on around you by about 1981, maybe 82. Yeah. Right after 81 or 82, it really hasn't been a thing that people could know. So, I mean, you're now talking about, you turn 81, that was 40 years ago, Don. 40 years ago. So, I mean, so anybody younger than 40 or younger than really 45 doesn't get this, right? Or,
right.
It's not in their lived experience.
Right. They didn't grow up in an inflationary period. They didn't understand how fast prices can rise when policies dictate and cause these issues. So yeah, so there I've got all my kids are all adults, the ages from 29 to 35. They're seeing this, that everywhere they turn, that stuff is going up. I mean, the mentality now to a lot of it, is I go back to say, shoot, if I don't buy it today, what's it going to be in a week or 10 days from now?
Right. Do I have thinking that we have not done in 40 years? We've not tried to game inflation in 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And that has its own problems when you do that and stuff like that. You mentioned this, the port issue. The Biden's solution to the port issue here in terms of, we're going to run these things 24/7. That's really not a solution. If you read,
it's nothing to do with it, right?
Right. If you read into this, I mean, operating more is not going to solve the problem. It's not magically going to clear up all the ships that are waiting, because they're still having worker shortages at the ports, and they're having truck drivers and issues. You still have to have truck drivers. You have to have people at the port to basically take the containers off and unload them and put them on another truck and all of these things. So this is not the panacea. He's trying to sell the headline thing like, okay, I'm doing this big bold thing. I'm going to solve the supply chain issue by forcing them to open the ports 24/7. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work.
Yeah, it shows the unseriousness of their approach. They don't consider this a big problem, right? And it's like those boats aren't making any noise. They're just running around on the ocean, right? They're not even really moving. Okay, so but you have California won't allow non-union truck drivers to work there. I mean, they don't allow it, right? You can't make your own side deal, and they don't allow. They've outlawed independent contracting. So, I don't know what that was supposed to accomplish, but it's been an unadorned disaster for California. So part of that is, part of it is California shooting itself in the foot. But, the question I want to ask people is, do you think, let's just tick through the problems: energy prices, China, North Korea, Afghanistan, inflation, supply chain, did I say immigration, energy prices, right? Is there anyone who can honestly argue that Trump would not have us in a better place on all of those, right? Because, we would not have a supply chain. This is a guy who's been dealing on supply chains his whole life. There's no way we would have a supply chain crisis with Trump in charge, right? This is it's nuts. And it's just because, they have no idea what to do. Their first idea of what to do was a non sequitur. It doesn't have anything to do with the problem.
Yeah, Biden, he says build back better. It's like it's not getting better.
Nothing's getting better, right? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing he is doing is making anything better. And so we have workers. We have all these people.
Well, something's getting better. Glenn Youngkin's chances of being governor of Virginia are getting better every day.
We'll probably have to add that, throw that in there because of that thing that happened. But it's just interesting because the other thing that we're facing too is that we're seeing these threats of strikes, or these strikes that are occurring, things that we haven't really seen in a long time. The unions are now trying to flex their muscle. But I'm a little concerned that that they're going to make this a little bit too much. We've got a lot of problems in here. This is not good for Biden. The last thing Biden needs, in my opinion, is to have these unions who support Biden go out there and throw workers on strike and only create more problems in our supply chain and all the issues that we're having right now. And Biden has no real answer for this, the inflation side of it. There was some
part of those union things. One of the things they're striking over is these COVID mandates.
Right.
They're gonna, that was a completely self-inflicted wound. He had, you've got about what you're going to get on vaccines, right? Everyone who can be convinced to do it has gone and done it. The other people, you're trying to force the people who didn't want it, right? And so now there's a surprising amount of people who didn't want it. And so you're running up against that. A lot of these unions are voting to go on strike. Their thing is vax policy. You got to stop this mandate.
Right. No, that's part of it. But I've always thought this about on these strikes, and no matter when they've occurred in history and things like this, and the unions and their push. I don't have a problem in advocating for better wages or better work conditions for a lot of people. There have been some terrible working conditions in some places in the country, but they never tell you what the other side of that coin is. Is that, by the way, if we negotiate a 25% pay raise over the next 3 years, we're not actually going to guarantee that we're going to be able to increase worker productivity enough to basically make that a kind of a nil effect. And that the cost of the goods, whatever they're producing, cars, planes, whatever, will not go up, right? So, you pay, and we're seeing this. This is part of the inflationary cycle right now, is that all these corporations are coming out, during earnings season. They're saying like, we've got cost pressures. I mean, we're now paying, we're having to offer $15 to $20 an hour to get people to walk in our door. Well, guess what? When you're now increasing those wages and those cost pressures, your soda pop and your candy bar and your chicken and your steak or whatever, they are going to cost more.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. There's only so much worker productivity they're going to get when they start handing out these wage increases, and so it's going to be there. And then people complain about the inflation. It's like, well, hello, you just cheered on these people to give all these huge wage increases. Do you understand how economics really work?
Who actually pays for that? That's
right.
Like, Biden's, their Build Back Better, $3-5 trillion bill that they're trying to get through Congress. It won't cost you a dime, right? It's going to all come from corporations and rich people. Well, the rich people is who hires us, and the corporations is who provides our goods. Now, if their costs go up, do they eat that extra tax bill? No, they do not. They never eat that tax bill. They never do it. They pass that cost along to consumers. So you're not voting. You're not getting anything for free. There never was a free lunch, and there's never going to be one.
Yeah, and we've had, part of the period, how corporations and companies have dealt with a lot of even the minimal inflation pressures and things like that they've had over the years. When inflation's been very tame for decades, is that, they tweak their packaging, right? Anybody who's bought diapers or cereal or virtually anything, if for some reason you have, like, maybe you saved an old cereal box for Wheaties box, you want it because you had Pete Rose on the front or something like that from 40 years ago or whatever, and you pick that up. Look at how much was in that box at that time versus today. The price of cereal that you get in a store hasn't fluctuated that much on the box basis, but on a per ounce basis, it's gone up. Soda pop, gone up. Diapers, when our kids were in diapers, the thing that was a constant frustration to us, and I'm talking like 30 years ago, was just that how the packages, there'd be like two fewer diapers in a package, but the package cost the same. And that was the way, it was shrinkage in the package, but it kept the price from going up. So it was something that consumers barely noticed. They had to deal with it. Now they're at the point where that, they tried that at the beginning, as the pandemic, all these other things, they tried that, to do that, but there's a limit to how much they could do with that. So now they're like, okay, we're done. And I can't take my box of cereal down to 6 ounces. I got to keep it at least 10 or 11 ounces. So therefore, the price of cereal is going to go up 5%. And then people start to howl. I'm like, hello, wake up. This is what is happening in our real world scenario. Look at this. The average price of a car has skyrocketed. I haven't bought a new car for years. We just basically buy used cars, so we can get, we can take some of that depreciation out. But even buying a car, the dynamics have shifted if you can find a car, that you want to begin with. That's right. But heck, you can sell an old clunker of a car now for a lot of money because cars are in such short supply. But who can afford to buy a car? And Biden on this gas thing, this thing what really bothers me is that who's going to get hurt more by higher gas prices? It's those blue collar people. It's a lot of his constituency. It's those people who don't make a lot of money, but they need to use their cars and their trucks to get around, to get to their jobs.
Right. So the Ed Markeys of the world can admire their windmills, right? That's basically what you're doing.
Yeah. No, it's just really, we've got, I'm afraid that, what we're seeing is this cycle that, we don't really know where it's going to end. How long are we going to, this is not transitory. I think everybody's got to get out of the mindset that this is just a short-term thing. This is based on what we're seeing. This is going to last a lot longer than people thought it was going to, and you need to plan for that fact that, that cost, that everything that we do for the time being is going to be more expensive. I think you and I are both seeing it, like just on the gas prices again. Every time we turn our head around, if we go down our street, the gas prices have gone up another nickel or whatever it is. And, it's getting to be one of those things. And the administration has zero answers. There was I didn't read it yet, but I think there was some op-ed in the Post this morning by someone who basically said, the supply chain issue problem, get used to it. Don't whine. Don't be so whiny.
Yeah.
Right.
Lower your expectations.
Lower your expectations.
That's what she said. I mean, that's what Jimmy Carter said. Remember, just wear your cardigan sweater in the house, drive 55, and we'll just lower our expectations.
Yeah,
right. America said, hey, Ronald Reagan says, build your expectations.
Yeah, I mean, there was some headline thing in CNN yesterday on their website about, West Virginia, the price of coal has been going up. So West Virginians are now, they're worried about how they're going to heat their homes because the heating costs are going to skyrocket.
Supposedly, heating costs here in Northern Virginia is supposed to go up 55% this winter. So, I mean, it's going to be a cold winter, and it's almost all self-inflicted.
Yeah,
can't blame anyone else. It's policy of the federal government that's making this happen, and it's poor leadership and ideology ahead of serving the citizens.
Okay, now one other thing that you also mentioned in there too was you were talking about all this money that Biden wants to spend. It looks like that they're trying to trim that back a little bit. I guess they want to make it more palatable. They want to get Manchin on board, right? Manchin and Sinema on board, and they're trying to get more to that Manchin number. They got rid of free community college. I think the child tax care credit is 1 year.
The community college got back in somehow. Right. They're juggling. They don't have the final bill written yet. They had to take some stuff out.
I mean, negotiation. They're going back and forth.
Yeah, the Post had a story this morning. Apparently, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Manchin has this thing about. I think Manchin's trying to stand fairly firm on the climate change stuff too, right?
Right. Yeah, he's in the coal business.
Right.
So he's not going to pass a lot of anti-coal stuff. So they're going to have to really tamp down what they want to do on climate, which loses them some votes. Or there's I think Jared Huffman and some other members of the House have said if the anti-coal provisions of this don't stay in, they won't have their vote. Right? These are liberal Democrats threatening to vote against this. And I have shown that they're willing to do it. Manchin wants to get it to about 2 trillion, 2.1 trillion. It's all up in the air how they will do it. They had taken community college out, and I think they've put that back in and done some other stuff. And they've tried to say, instead of giving you a benefit for 5 years, we're only going to give it to you for 3 to lower the money. And this kind of, bookkeeping ledger domain, basically, to try to, make it look better for Manchin. But the thing about this is, and I look for this every day, but Manchin has given them a price. If you get around 2 trillion, he will change from no to yes. But Sinema has not given them a price. My understanding of Sinema's position on this is that she is opposed to the legislation. So, I'm not sure, when they keep saying she won't even negotiate. I think her position is no. I think her position is the same as Tom Cotton's, right? It doesn't matter the negotiations. I'm not worried about that. It's no, so, I don't think they've grappled with that or realized it, or I guess they can get Manchin on their side. They think they'll just, pressure her into changing. But I mean, she likes standing apart from them. I mean, and, in her climate that she has to win elections in, that's the way to do it. Is, you don't want to be Chuck Schumer's right-hand person, right? And try to run in Arizona and win seats. So, I don't think that I think they're a lot farther away from having all this worked out than they think, because I don't think she signed up to cooperate with any of it yet.
Right. And that's why I was hedging a little bit, because I mean, Manchin's been the center of attention for the Democrat leadership, with the assumption, I think, that Sinema will go hand in hand with him. But Sinema, there has been no indication, as you said, that she would do that. She has not, she's not said, oh, here's my number, right? So we don't know what her number is. And so it does lead to believe more like what you said, like she opposes this legislation. And so they get to 2 trillion or whatever, and Manchin says yes, and they're still stuck with trying to convince Sinema.
Yeah, and as you're talking about numbers, Joe Biden has her phone number, but she doesn't answer. Right?
Yeah, right.
She's tired of taking those calls. She said what she wants, and they're like, there's the story of the Post today is like, oh, we're all optimistic, we're all meeting and talking, and we're really on glide path to get this done. but no one mentioned that anybody talked to her, right? And at the bottom, the 80th graph or the 82 paragraph story, it's like, well, no one's actually talked to Cinema and figured out what it would take to get her to vote yes on this. So, they're spinning their wheels. They're spending a lot of energy and time looking like they're doing something, but they're not talking to the person who stands in their way.
Right. I mean, and the Democrats, they, right now, they're, kind of, to me, it's like damage control a little bit. They want to remain optimistic on this because things have just been so terrible for them this year that, it's like, yeah, we're close. All we need to do is this, and we're negotiating, and, it's just right around the corner. We're going to have the votes. We're going to get this done. But, just once again, just like we have talked about on this program before, that the clock continues to tick. And
another thing that's going on with the clock is, so some Democrat members, and this happened, I was on the Hill when the last time this kind of happened, 2006. And it was Republicans then. We realized, that we were not, George Bush's popularity was in the single digits. They were going to get wiped out, and they knew it. And so people start retiring because, who wants to be in the minority? By the time you go back into the majority, it could be years, it could be decades, right? And so you're just going to sit there and be a minority, zero voice congressman, right? So a lot of Democrats are starting to announce their retirement. David Price did it yesterday. There was two of them yesterday. He was one of them. And so what happens is two things happen. One is those seats become extremely vulnerable, right? Because you don't have a known commodity on either side. And so with the momentum going toward the Republicans have a chance to win some of those seats, because the people who quit tend to be the people who are in competitive districts. If you're in a safe district, what do you care, right? So, so that's one thing. And the other thing is, though, those people are, since they're not running again, they're emboldened to vote however they want to vote. So, if that changes the dynamics of what they decide to do. They can vote for things that we would not consider very popular because they're not standing before the voters again.
Yeah, I'm going to put. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think that's right. I mean, though several of these Democrats are in some pretty Democratic district seats, but it does make it more interesting along the way. I think we have 7 Democrats that have announced their retirement and 5 others that are going to give up their seats because they're going to run for all offices. Like Connor Lamb is going to run for U.S. Senate and things like that. So from the House perspective,
you also have some Democrat states are losing seats, right? Illinois, New York, Connecticut, maybe somewhere else up there. They're losing seats. So, some Democrats are going to get, redistrict out of their seat.
Right. And what we've seen on the redistricting so far, but particularly anything that is got remotely controlled by or has where Democrats have influence is that anything that they said in the past, like we want like a fair and independent process for redistricting, has gone out the window because they're looking at what's going to happen in 2022 and they're like, okay, we're going to protect Democrats at all costs and we're going to just basically district Republicans out of our state as much as we can. So, Illinois is one of those examples is that, the pledge to be a little more even-handed has gone right out the window. It's not going to happen. Virginia, the Democrats walked out of a redistricting, that commission meeting, right? So then I guess, if they don't solve that, goes to the Supreme Court in Virginia, who then I guess draws the maps. And I'm not familiar enough with the Supreme Court in Virginia to know which way that would go, but I'm going to assume that they would try to be somewhat impartial, but maybe not. But at least maybe not as gerrymandered as the Democrats would try to get it. So the Democrats, they preach one thing, but they're doing a completely different thing when it comes to reality because they just see what's going to happen here. They're in trouble. But you're right. You're definitely right about when you've announced your retirement, no matter Republican, Democrat, whatever. At that point in time, you're like, I'm now going to vote whatever way I want to vote. I don't necessarily have to stick to the party line. And if you're a Democrat,
the other side of that is I'm free to stick to the party line when the party line is unpopular, right? That's what ends up happening. Is like David Price can vote for this budget now, right?
Right, because there will be no repercussions for him personally.
Right. You don't have to go explain it anymore.
Right, doesn't have to explain it to the voters and everything like that. So it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out in the end. I mean, West Virginia is losing a seat, but they're all a Republican delegation. So that's been an interesting rate. That's been interesting to watch because you've got two Republicans running against each other. One of whom I know, Alex Mooney, and he and the other guy, they're going to duke it out. I one's more old line kind of establishment, and then there's kind of more this very more pro Trump guy and Mooney. I don't know which way West Virginia will go, but West Virginia. I mean, I travel through that when I go see my grandkids, but the population of the state is shrinking, and
No,
so
it's Trump country too.
it's
I
Trump
don't
country.
think. I think don't go against Trump there. I mean, he won West Virginia by 41 points.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't go against him in that state for sure. Um, all right, so the Biden administration had been rebuked on remain in Mexico by the court. So they did, they're going to comply with this remain in Mexico, which I find that to be a delicious irony or something. I mean, here's a Trump policy that they tried to do away with. The court came back and said no.
Right.
And they've got a border problem. I mean, it actually makes sense.
Right. And so, what happens here, just so people understand, is if you apply for asylum to get in from, wherever they're coming from into the United States, okay, to get in on an asylum claim, right? You go to the front of the class, the front of the line ahead of all the people who have filed to, just move here and immigrate through normal channels, right? You go past them because you can demonstrate that if you're not taken into the United States, if you're made to go to your home country, you could be, killed or punished or whatever. So, most of these people that are coming to the southern border of the United States, that's not their scene. They're not going to be persecuted or prosecuted if they go back home, right? They're economic migrants. They're trying to move here for a better life. So those cases, those people that when you come here and try to get in and you get caught and you just say, hey, I'm an asylum claim, you can't send me back. We're saying, if you have an asylum case, instead of waiting inside the United States and, not turning up for your hearing, right, which was the case like 91% of the time, you wait outside the country, right? When your hearing comes up, you can come in and have your hearing. And if you succeed, then you can come into the country, right? And so Biden tried to say, just wait in the country like we used to do in the old days when 91% of the people didn't show up for the hearings. And the court said, no, that you can't do that anymore. This was done in a lawful way. And, to throw it off is unlawful.
Yeah. I mean, then that's one of the things that bothers me or has bothered me for a long time. It's just that, they, particularly with the media, with the liberals, whatever, talking about, about every time we talk about border issues, and all these asylum claims and other things that, we give them a court date and most of the people don't show up, but no one talks about that. I mean, it's rarely ever talked about. And this is a problem. I mean, this is why we have to reform, immigration because of this. It's just like, so what? I mean, if 91% of the people are ignoring it, then you've got no policy in effect. I
right.
mean,
if you don't enforce the law, there's no law. We say down in
Yeah.
Louisiana, ain't no man, ain't no law.
Yeah, exactly. So, so that's just, to me, that's just absolutely insane, with that. And I mean, I think, this once again goes back to, what we said at the beginning of the program. It's just that you've got these policies that, Trump had put in place and, Biden administration just out of really spite, reverse them without thinking about the consequences of them. And they, they come back to
wanting the consequences. In the case of immigration, there's some evidence that, they want the border overrun, right? They think they can convert those people into voters.
Yeah. Well, the border thing has all worked out so well for our vice president who's supposed to be in charge of this thing.
You know what? It's going to be the single thing that makes her unacceptable as a presidential candidate, right? Because, every opponent that she ever has from now on say, hey, she was supposed to be in charge of the border and she did nothing, right? She neglected it. She went one time and didn't really even go to where it needed to be. And she ignored the problem and completely, ignored her duties to it. So, it's like you had a chance to show us you were a capable executive, and you didn't do it. You walked away from it. You scoffed at it. You said it wasn't your problem. So, I think, I don't know that she would have been a front runner in 2024 anyway. I think even the Democrats realize that that's a losing proposition, but she definitely won't be now.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there are some people in the party that wanted her to be the solution, female, black, that kind of a thing. That it'd be good for them to put that out there. But as a vice president, not that the vice presidents are normally do a whole heck of a lot in general. I mean, they're not the frontline people. It's the president is the top line guy, but when by Biden, by trying to put her in charge of various things, it's like, where the heck has she been? We have more people that entering the country, crossing the border, than we've had in like 35 years. How do you defend that?
Right, and it was a good opportunity. Like, if you think about, I keep saying, if Trump were here in this situation, what would change, right? Well, in this situation, we'd be dealing with Mike Pence, right, who was a governor. He knows how to command resources. He did a good job running the COVID task force and running like disaster response and so forth. That was kind of under his portfolio, because he knows how to pull these agencies together and get them to work together, right? He was pretty good at that. He was, it wasn't a big thing, didn't get a ton of publicity when he was in, but he did a pretty good job. And he at least, stuck his head in there and tried, right? She didn't even try. She just, I'm avoiding that. I'm somewhere else.
All right. I'm going to give you two choices for Kamala Harris: vice president or attorney general. Which would you have chosen?
For her?
Yeah.
Vice president. Right? Because, I mean, attorney general, she can get you in a lot of trouble. And she's not a very good lawyer. And, that could have been a disaster.
Do you think that Merrick Garland has done is better by comparison, or what? If you had to compare the two, is Merrick Garland a better choice
for attorney general than Kamala? Yeah, I mean, it's terrible and even worse.
But, right, I know. I'm not giving you much of a choice here, but
but I'll tell you what. Speaking of Merrick Garland, he's about to have to face some pretty tough decisions, because this Durham stuff is starting to come out. They've indicted a guy. They searched the house of Oleg Deripaska yesterday, who is a key figure in all this. He's the guy George Papadopoulos said has sort of brought all this together and made it happen. He has a house in D.C. and the FBI tossed it. The thing I worried about is, did they go there to gather information or conceal information, right? So because you really can't trust the FBI at this point. But it looks like the gears of law enforcement are going to start to unwind on this, are going to turn on these defendants, these Durham defendants. And it's a lot of Democrat people. It's Mark Elias is right outside the reach right now, but he's been connected to some of this. He's their top election lawyer of the whole party. So, it's a quiet little bomb that people aren't really watching yet, but it may not be long until he has some, and Garland's not really in a position to stop this. The way Trump set it up is, in case he lost, this would go on beyond him. And so that's the situation they're in. And, I don't think they're just starting to come to terms with the gravity of it. And once this starts rolling, I mean, if you stop it, it's pretty clear that you're quashing an investigation that something makes you look bad, right? It's it's concealing, right? So they're gonna have to let it roll forward, and there's a lot of bodies there that could be claimed.
All right, I want to get your thoughts on a couple things here. Trump suing the January 6th committee to block the records release, and then their vote to find Steve Bannon in contempt.
Okay, so these seem like related, but they're different. They're both pretty interesting. Trump is asserting executive privilege claims, and so he's saying that these are private communications with him and his advisors, that those are not subject to disclosure, which is true. Pre-decisional, they're called. So that's an interesting fight. Bannon's kind of turns on another thing. the the Congress has the power to subpoena people and subpoena documents, information, and enforce it with with law enforcement um, in its role as in its oversight role, right? To provide oversight for government programs. What is getting oversighted here, right? Looks very much like a criminal investigation. The executive investigates crimes in our system. Congress does not investigate crimes. So what Bannon's lawyers are saying is the scope of this may be something that Congress is not allowed to do. The subpoenas themselves may be unconstitutional because the commission itself seems to be looking at persecution, criminal prosecution, as opposed to information gathering, which it is allowed to do. So, both of them are interesting claims. There's some case law that says the executive privilege extends once a president leaves office. I think that's what Trump's relying on. And the other is, there's some settled law, but there's conflicting whether those precedents apply to this. There's differences in the cases. So I think they'll both bubble up. And, I think it'll be a long time, if ever, before the Jan 6 Commission gets the information that it wants. And I think House changes hands in 2022. That's their deadline, because if the House changes hands, that commission will be shut down in 5 minutes.
I mean, the first deadline is November 12th, because that's when I can, because with the archives or whatever, saying that they will release, they will go ahead and do that. But because he's suing, it's the advantage is still for Trump, just on a legal basis, because he takes it to court and he gets a judge to come in there, or he takes it to the Supreme Court. All they have to do is issue a stay or whatever, and in essence, that will get kicked down the road, and you go into 2022 and all these other things, this thing could just roll on to the point where, it'll hit the election and boom, it just disappears, and the Democrats, they're still, chipping away at this January 6th thing. Okay. So, we're almost 10 months past this point. It's like, how much longer do they want to beat this, what I consider to be a relatively dead horse? Because I don't think this helps them electorally.
I don't think it does either. I think that, their base is insisting on it, insurrection, right? But they're past the point where people care. And it's like most people have made their judgment, and their judgment, depending on where you are on the spectrum, is either, it was just an innocent protest, or, there was a few jerks who got in there and destroyed property, and, prosecute them all you want, in proportion to other people whose crime is being a jerk at a protest, right? Not, murder one, but, no one's been charged with insurrection. No weapons were found. The only person killed in the protest was shot in cold blood by the police, which is also suspicious. And there's nothing to really say. No one looted on the way out of town and all that. So I think people say, this was a speech and it was a protest, and trying to make more out of it is partisan. And I think when you look at the polling on this, the independents are the only ones that matter, because Republicans all think it's ridiculous. The Democrats all think it's absolutely the most necessary thing that's ever happened. But the independents are against it. So I don't know beyond, if this starts getting mucked up in court battles, I don't know that it will make sense for them to continue it.
But Carl Bernstein wants Trump supporters to be investigated because Trump is a psychopath and a sociopath. Unbelievable. Anyway, we're down. We're
probably
down
time to start paying attention to Carl Bernstein.
Yeah, long time. It should have been a long time ago. All
That's
right, 2
50
minutes.
years.
2 minutes.
All right, 2 minutes.
Seriously.
Okay, so the vax stuff is coming to a head. So Washington State fired its football coach. Southwest Air has said, it's not going to suspend people who don't get the vax. Dan Bongino, I guess, is threatening to quit Cumulus. If Cumulus was one of the biggest radio companies in the country, over the vax thing. Something happened. Let me see if I can figure this out for us. something's happened while we've been on the air on that. A court has ruled. What did they rule? Juvenile even after, now there's, the mask and so forth, the rules and so forth. They're starting you're about to get to some key jurisprudence about this, where courts decide if these mask and vax mandates are constitutional. And the answers right now are mixed. We don't really know what we're going to get, but the people are voting with their feet on this, and it turns out that a lot more people are unwilling to do this than anyone thought possible a month ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's true. Yeah, just to say too, it's just, before we close, I just want to get your thoughts on Coach O.
So it looks like Coach O's, I don't know if the fortunes of the football team are necessarily what got him fired. They haven't played as well as people wanted them to play. They've had a lot of injuries. In other situations, this might have been explainable, but it looks like his personal life careened a little bit out of control, and the stress got to him a little bit, and he was screaming at everybody, and he made some did some things that people said he probably shouldn't be the guy on. It's unfortunate. As a guy that lived his whole life, he's exemplifies Louisiana football like few other people could ever claim to have done. Born there, played there, coached there, and so forth. Won the national championship with probably the best college football team ever assembled. And 2 years later, less than 2 years later, he's out. And I think the thing that you heard in the press reports there is that his thing was relief, right? And it's like, this is off my shoulders now. And as much as I love doing it, I wasn't doing it like I could, and I'm out of it. So, and one last thing before we go, by the next time we do this show, I'll be 60.
Well, you'll qualify in some places for a senior discount. Not a lot, but a few.
Yeah, I got some at 55. Denny's, they stick up for you early.
Yeah.
But I'm now moving into the 60 ones. I can move up to the gold tees, on the golf.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, if we get to a Golden Corral, my wife and I get a $1 off our dinner or something like that. But
there you go.
The closest Golden Corral is like 30 miles away, so it's not something we're going to get to very often.
I hear you.
All right, good. Well, join us older people. We'll welcome you to the club. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America, and we will see you again next week.